being quite left-wing myself, I often find myself asking, and certainly people I've spoken to on the left find themselves asking, is there a point in debating with certain right-wing people? Now, this isn't the case for every single person on the right. I mean, there's certainly some people who do want to have a genuine conversation. However, it is certainly the case that many on the right exist solely to waste people's time, to denigrate and demean those trying to argue their left-wing positions, and to target and oppress the marginalised and generally discriminated against parties. So, for instance, you see a lot of trans people constantly face their identity and their status as a trans person being questioned by right-wing people supposedly wanting a debate. You see people demand constant answers to their questions and constant conversation with them and engagement, despite acting in a completely petulant and frankly quite volatile and rude manner. You see people insisting that they only want a good-natured conversation when the topic they're discussing is something as crucial to someone's integrity and someone's life as their entire existence, as we see with LGBT plus people and trans people. And really, we need to ask ourselves, is this the sort of debate that we consider valuable? Is this the sort of conversation that people who do have good intentions really hold? Someone brought up to me that a lot of people who are on the right and who do consider themselves rational simply want to drag down and dog down those on the left and those who are marginalised with more semi-abusive rubbish, like questions invading trans people's sense of sensibility and sense of validity, like questions that seek to ask people whether they're actually being affected negatively or if it's just their own imagination, a form of gaslighting in a way. There's so many people who are dedicated to wasting people's time with this sort of tactic of framing anyone who doesn't talk to them as a hypocrite and ignorant and someone who is afraid of debate. But then when they do get into a debate, asking persistent questions that essentially are tended to go nowhere, attempts to dog down anyone, calling them out for their chicanery as a bigot or as silly, and generally being obtuse and ignorant of the arguments presented to them when people do actually try to engage them by distracting onto another tactic. It's something that a lot of people on the right and a lot of people who do intend to offend and to cause distress have sort of perfected the idea of wasting people's time and criticising those who don't allow themselves to have their time wasted, is why you see people like Steve Shives demonised as this sort of awful person who hates conversation and wants all the anti-feminists like killed and stuff, essentially because he hasn't put up with the nonsense that a lot of people have been throwing his way. People insisting, I want a debate, I want to talk with Steve Shives. And Steve's recognised that these people, for the most part, are a bit of a waste of time. Like, Steve shouldn't have to entertain people who in one breath like insult him and his wife and make awful cartoons and generally speak of him in a very like juvenile, immature manner, and then on the next hand wanting like fully fledged out debates and wanting Steve to give up his time to them. And you have to realise that people who go into conversations with an air of rudeness and veneer and unpleasantries aren't worth your time and don't deserve any more of your time than what you're willing to give them. And backing out of a conversation with them, not willing to engage with them, is not cowardice or being afraid that your ideas aren't good enough to hold up in debate. That's self-preservation, self-help. It's not good to have someone irritable and frustrating, constantly telling you all your negatives, or your supposed negatives to their point of view, simply to try and reinforce the idea that they are right. Lots of right-wing people do not care for the ability of their arguments. They only care to sort of make people who are on the left and who are marginalised feel down and feel upset. And I think there's an importance to understand that, you know, not everyone on the right is like this. There are people who do want to debate, and I've spoken to many of them on my channel. I do enjoy debate. But there is a line, and it's clear that some people cross the line far too much. Certainly those on the sort of trolley Kekistan sort of line of stance, people who just seem to exist to solely irritate and annoy and wind up and troll and just try and make themselves make the internet a more unpleasant place. You can find them anywhere in right-wing circles, just people who are thoroughly unpleasant and only want arguments to sort of annoy people they're arguing against. It's why the I identify as an attack helicopter crowd is still sort of going, because they do such a good job of firstly irritating and demeaning trans people, but secondly presenting themselves in a way that they are a legitimate argument when they're not. So, going into places and saying, oh, well, if, you can identify as non-binary, I mean, I just say I'm a toaster or a dragon. And it's a nonsense argument. It's really juvenile, basically, flawed stuff. But because they are so insistent with it, they can legitimize it to some people. And some people genuinely think there's a credible stance in people who think non-binary genders are nonsense. But I think it's just important to realise that some people are horrible, arrogant jerks who essentially want to waste your time, who want to demean you for having an opinion that you do, for being a marginalised person, and essentially wants you to feel bad. And it's self-preservation and self-helpful to avoid them and to ignore them, because they're not entitled to any of your time. And not wanting to debate people who have no interest in being nice or being reasonable or even just listening to you, really, is justified, in my opinion. And it should be your opinion as well. So long story short, while I am a channel and I am a person that does love debate, I do love speaking to people and I do love arguing, because, I get a bit of a kick out of it. But there's nothing saying that I have to, or anyone has to. And if someone on the right wants to try and invalidate your identity or your position or marginalised status or whatever, then there's no need to engage with them. Because if they're turning up saying, oh, all your racism that you face is a myth, or all your gender identity is bullshit, or any other nonsense like that, there's no reason to expect them to be holding any form of genuinity. So you don't need to engage with them. And I think the most important thing to take out of it is that you are worth more than what people on the right will tell you. If you're trans or a woman or LGBT plus or mixed race or black or whatever, the many elements that certain people on the far right will attack you for, you don't need to worry about them because they're wrong.